Hello, everybody. Get off my lawn cards. I'm Dan. Welcome in. And continuing my series on the current card companies, I wanted to talk a little bit about Panini and where they're at, and I think where they're heading. And Panini did have a booth at the National this year, and it seemed like the booth was fairly busy as I went through there once in a while. But in my mind, I kind of question, well, why is really Panini there anymore? And to me, Panini is it's almost kind of a sad story a little bit as far as where they are now compared to where they were a couple of years ago. And some of it they kind of brought on themselves, as we'll see. But for 15 years, Panini dominated the sports card scene. They had the football license, they had the basketball license, and they did produce baseball, minus the logos. And they did produce a lot of nice stuff, actually. And when they first started with the license, they came out guns blazing. They had terrific products that were really in stark contrast to really kind of a stale Tops brand. Tops had the basketball and they had the football, and their products were just very mid, to use the slang of today. And Panini just, you know, really made some great brands that are going to be popular, for many, probably decades after they have quit producing. And some people want to crap all over the Panini brand, saying, "Oh, they were terrible" and all that. That's just not true. Here's a couple examples. My favorite Panini set is 2009 10 Court Kings. And it's just a terrific card. It's like they painted the cards. This is a cabinet card, Steph Curry rookie. It's one of my favorite cards that I own. And it is numbered to 349. I don't know if you can see that or not. But it is like a painting. It's a little hard to see on screen here, but in hand, it's just like a painting. It's almost like you see brushstrokes. And it's a great card. Unfortunately, when this card got shipped to me, 15 years ago, they put this card with no plastics in between two pieces of cardboard. That's how they sent it to me. And it did damage one of the corners, but I kept it anyways. I think I paid $7 for that card. I was mad, but I'm just like, I like this card so much, I'm not sending it back. And, that's one of those cards I don't care about the condition or anything like that. What leads me to say that Panini is kind of like a dying star? Well, there's some obvious things and some things maybe not so obvious. The obvious thing, 2 years ago they lost the license to Fanatics. And that's the end right there. Fanatics has a license, Panini can make non-licensed products, but it's not nearly the same. It's not nearly the same. Second, I think Panini kind of hurt themselves in the last 5 years. They bastardized brands. Like another brand that I really like is Gold Standard. And as a left alone product, it was great. They even put gold in some of the cards. And it's just awesome. Awesome looking stuff. But then they, instead of leaving it as a standalone brand, they mix it in with like Chronicles, which Chronicles is a great idea when they first came out. It's like, hey, let's try all these different brands. And if something becomes very popular, we'll use that as a standalone brand. They did that with Obsidian. But with Gold Standard, they went the opposite direction. They're like, hey, we got a really successful brand. Let's just mix it in with Chronicles. And it really didn't fit. It really kind of hurt the product. They did that kind of stuff quite often. The redemptions, number three. Redemptions were always a problem with Panini. Panini points. I personally just never got it. One of the big hits is 400 Panini points. Big deal. You go on the website and you can't buy anything with it anyways, or something that just, mid in the first place. People were complaining about quality issues as well near the end. People, there was a perception they were all about money, not the collector, and that's always that's you're already hearing that about Fanatics. So, I mean, that's a common complaint about any company. Now, Panini is not going to go away, at least not right away. Panini is trying to do the Leaf philosophy where they don't have the licenses, but they're going to produce cards of whoever they can. For instance, this year's NBA product, they have NBA products. They have Donruss, for instance. They're coming out with Prism, I believe, as well. But they don't. They're missing out on a couple key players that have exclusive with Fanatics. Cooper Flag, Dylan Harper come to mind. They're not in the products. That's a big strike against them right away. Not only do you not have the license, but you can't make product with the best couple players in the class. That's just not a that's not something that's going to last. Let's just say it that way. And I like the Donruss basketball that they're producing. I bought some of it at the National, but it has to be like, for me, it has to be variations and it has to be low numbered. I'm not buying base of that stuff, and it just looks weird. But they're still capable of making nice stuff, like Leaf. Leaf is in that same ballpark as Panini and has been for years. Um, there's lots of old Panini stuff out there. If you look at the boxes behind me, a lot of those boxes have a lot of Panini product in them. And so there's a possibility that Panini stuff will grow in nostalgia the farther you get away with it, from it. For instance, I have two original Panini Prism basketball sets from the first year they made it. And people might get very nostalgic for that and maybe drive the price up of that stuff. We'll see. I hope so for in those cases, purely selfish reasons. So that's kind of where Panini is. They have the WNBA license, which is great. And, they've made money off Caitlin Clark and they've done that very well. But they need another Caitlin Clark to come out and be another Caitlin Clark type. Right now, there isn't. And so that train, that gravy train is kind of out. That's, that's kind of out on its rear end, supposedly, basically. Now, I think Panini is like a dying star. When you look at stars in the universe, they don't just explode and burn out and shut off like a light switch. What stars will do in the universe is they burn out of most of its fuel, but they don't die right away. What they do is they keep going for quite a while with less fuel, with less brightness, and they just kind of fade away over, millions of years in a star's case. But I think that's what's going to happen to Panini. Not having the licenses, not missing out on exclusive athletes, even though their price points are much lower than Fanatics. People complain about the price of wax with Fanatics. It's not really the case with Panini as much. They're smart enough to realize they can't get the same money, so they've been charging less. Even by doing that, I can't see Panini surviving long term. It's sad because, like I said, when they took over the game, they produced some of the nicest cards I have ever seen. Court Kings, National Treasures, etc. I mean, just gold standard. Stuff that's, like I said, I got boxes behind me that have tons of Panini stuff. But, their time has come and passed. And, would I be surprised if Panini didn't exist in 5 years? I wouldn't be surprised. It's just kind of the direction that I think Panini's heading. And when you don't have the licenses, it's the same with Upper Deck. Upper Deck's kind of in license hell. What keeps them going is hockey. Panini doesn't have that. They have the WNBA, which is okay, but that's not the direction that league's heading is not great. And they don't have really a big star like a Caitlin Clark coming down the pike, like I said. So we'll see. But I mean, the momentum really kind of points toward negative things. So that's that about Panini. I have one more in the trilogy coming. I want to talk about Fanatics, and there's a lot to say about Fanatics. And so I'm going to say some things about Fanatics. But until next time, Ketos, thank you. Like, subscribe. Had a ton of people view the negatives of the National. Like I said, I love the National. And so, but I would love to see the National improve on some things, as everybody would. Everybody would. There's things that everybody say, hey, I want to see that improve. Maybe some people like to see more breakers. It's not me, but a lot of feedback, a lot of comments. I try to answer all the comments as best I can, and so ton of people that watched the bad ones. Hey, watch the good things too. If you're thinking about going to the National, I shot lots of footage at the National, talked about the National a lot. There's a lot of good videos. My brother did good videos about the National. Alaska Sports Cards is his handle if you haven't watched his stuff. So until next time, Ketos, thank you, and we'll see you down the trail.